So Christians often point to Romans 13 to say that Christians, we must submit to whatever man's law says. And there is some truth to that. But it's really interesting because we need to keep going in Romans 13. In verse 8, Paul comes up and says, "Owe no one anything except to love one another. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law." Closing in verse 10, he says, "Love is the fulfilling of the law." Right? So we have this same chapter, right? Same context. But these two verses come in and change the idea. And this isn't new. Jesus dealt with this his entire ministry because people were pointing to the letter of the law and avoiding the point. Pharisees, guilty, the worst maybe, of this. And Jesus confronted them directly in Matthew 23. He says, "You tithe mint, dill, and cumin, but neglect the weightier things of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness." So the Pharisees were keeping small print and missing the entire point. Someone asked Jesus to name the greatest commandment. He didn't point to a single law. What did he say in Matthew 22? "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, strength, mind." And then he follows it up. "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." On these two commandments depend the entirety of the law and prophets. You see, every law is supposed to be pointing at love the entire time. Paul says it in Galatians chapter 5. The whole law is fulfilled in one word. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. So when the law and compassion suddenly come into conflict, it's not a sign to abandon love and compassion. Quite the opposite. Because when we look again at Romans chapter 13, where people quote for submission to the law, Paul is telling us to submit to human authority, but that submission has a ceiling. And the minute a human law demands we abandon love, mercy, and putting others before ourselves, we have then hit that ceiling. And it's not a new idea. When the apostles were commanded by their own governing authorities to stop preaching the gospel, they didn't hesitate in Acts 5. They said, we must obey God rather than man. So when a law tells us to set aside love and compassion, we have hit the ceiling. And that question we should be asking ourselves is no longer complicated because it's coming down to a choice. Are we going to follow God or are we going to follow man? That's it. Because the law was never meant to put man's authority at the top. The law was meant to put love and God's love on display. And God's authority has always and will always be the authority to follow.